Equipment selection, let's talk about that real quick. First of all, weapon mounted lights. A weapon mounted light does not replace a handheld light. And the reasoning for that is you cannot draw your gun out and find your car keys with it, or read a VIN number off of a car, or direct traffic, or all the other kind of things that we have seen and heard people do with a weapon mounted light. Just because it's on your gun and you have a light on there doesn't mean that now I need to draw my gun and point it at anything that I want to identify. It's great when it comes to shooting the gun fast in the dark, but it's not for locating and identifying where a threat is. Activation is very important when it comes to a weapon mounted light and how we activate it. I've got two different types of lights that I want, or three different types that I'll discuss here real quickly. Probably one of the great ways to do it, and it has some drawbacks, are a tape switch such as the one on the Surefire, meaning when I draw the gun, when I press the switch or I grip the gun, it turns my light on automatically as part of me gripping the gun. They work really well. There's a couple of things with these that are interesting. One of which is I have seen a lot of them fail. They get worn, they rub into holsters, all that kind of stuff. So I draw the gun out, my light doesn't turn on now, and I'm guessing on how I turn the thing on. I have seen two potential negatives. One is some people have a hard time turning the light off when they want it to be off. They're holding on the gun, now the light's on no matter what, and that may not be a good thing. I may want to be in, a lower level of light. The other thing that I've seen, depending on your hand size and how you grip the gun, is sometimes I grip the gun in just such a way, once I crank down on the gun, I don't get quite enough pressure on that switch and the light doesn't come on. So I've seen a lot of people in low light shoots, they've got them on their gun, and as soon as they go up and they start shooting, the light's on and off, on and off, and they're having a really hard time hitting that button. So your hand size can play a big factor on whether this is. So all of these, if you have a tape switch, you should still have the ability to operate with the levers on the light. So this one has a toggle switch. I can push it down and turn it instant on, or you can just push on it, this Surefire unit, and it'll turn the light on as well. The other ones are some of these smaller lights, like that's TRL7 or Streamlight. This one has buttons on the back, and I can either push it quickly and release and it turns on and stays on, or I can push it and hold it for a second and then it's in a momentary mode. The newer switches, this is the 7A, are way easier to use than the first generation that had the button on the side that you had to push first. So this is a big improvement over the first generation of this light. Extremely small, 500 lumens, works really well. It's very important though that you spend a lot of time working with turning that light on and off. Here's another one that I want to point out. Brightness is, in my opinion, more important on a weapon mounted light, especially on a long gun. And the reason for that is if I'm using a weapon mounted light, if I am clearing or doing things with that weapon mounted light, if I've got an extremely bright light, 800,000 lumens, this is no big deal anymore. Now I can use that light without pointing the gun at someone. Especially with the long gun, I had a 1,000 lumen light. I turn the light on, it can reflect off the floor, it can reflect off the ceiling. I can still see everything that I need to see. I can locate and identify without pointing a gun at somebody that may not necessarily need a gun pointed at them. I don't have to actually use force, potentially get myself into trouble just to identify something, okay? So on a weapon mounted light, brightness is more important than a handheld light. Lasers are great. They give you options. How many people have used lasers on handguns before? Just a couple of you? They give you options. There's a couple of cool things about a laser here, and I've got one I'll turn on here in a minute. The big number one thing that I think makes lasers great is the fact that your head does not have to be in alignment with the gun. What that means is if I am in an awkward shooting position where I can't necessarily get my head behind the gun, for example, if I was trying to shoot underneath that truck there, I can shoot much higher on the other side and still get good hits, because in order for me to shoot otherwise, I'd have to actually get my head below the concrete or over the top of a wall, for example. If I'm trying to shoot over a wall, in order for me to aim that gun, I'm not tall enough, but I can see over the wall, and now with the laser, I can still aim the gun effectively. So there's a couple of things that are really kind of neat that you can do with a laser that you can't do without one. So that's one thing. It gives you options that you wouldn't have otherwise. It's just like a red dot on a pistol. It works great if you have visual or focus issues, especially if you get older. You're going to pick something up in the middle of the night. You're not going to have time to put your glasses on. You can still see it at a distance, but you can't necessarily focus on those sights at all. The laser kind of takes care of that problem because now I just put it where I need it to be and I can hit things. It's a language translator, meaning when I turn the laser on, everybody knows what's on the other end of that. And it seems to be quite universal. I've heard stories from law enforcement guys that had laser on their gun. I've heard stories from guys that have deployed that had lasers on their guns, visible lasers, if you will, and people know what that means and they respond accordingly. Okay, so from that standpoint, regardless if you can speak the language or not, people understand what's going on when that laser comes on. The big problem with lasers, in my opinion, and the reason that I don't put one onto my carry gun is how we activate it. It's the same kind of problem that we run into with the weapon mounted lights, but even more so because if I'm relying on this as an aiming device, it has to turn on all the time. Meaning when I grab it, I need to be able to fail safe it turn on and me rely on it. And that becomes quite difficult with most of the activation methods that are out there. So that is my big thing. The best ones for a while there were the laser grips that you could put onto the side panels of guns. They were great, they worked great. And then they kept changing the location of the activation button till the point where I couldn't use them anymore. The original ones that was just the right side panel, that thing was 100% for me. If I grabbed it, the laser turned on. But now they've moved the button around to the front. The grip has gotten bigger. It put it in the wrong place. And when I grip the gun the wrong way, it might turn on, it might not turn on. So that's the reason that I kind of got away from relying on a laser. Flashlight considerations, i.e. handheld lights. The first one is the size of the light is important and it's got to be something that you're willing to carry all the time. What I find is a lot of people, they like these big, really powerful lights, but then when it comes time to actually put their gun out, go on and carry it every day, they end up going, I don't really need a light right now. And then they're not carrying a flashlight. In my opinion, having a light on you if you're carrying a gun is absolutely critical. Because if you find yourself in a dark environment, you need to be able to identify what you're looking at. And people say, well, it's daytime, I'm not gonna have to worry about it. Well, if you're inside a building somewhere and the power goes out, it's not daytime anymore. Okay, you go out to the mall or you're in a grocery store and the power goes out, now all of a sudden it's pitch black dark. So having a handheld light on you all the time is absolutely critical. How will you carry it? It's got to be someplace that you can get to easily. Almost everybody I know that is carrying concealed ends up running some sort of pocket clip in order to clip it so they can get to it easily. All right, that seems to be the most consistent and most common method. You can also get pouches and stuff to put it in as well, but the pocket carry with the clip seems to be the most common at this point. But it's a consideration for you. Power and brightness is important. For the most part, brighter is better. Run time is still a consideration, meaning being able to turn that light on and it not die in 20 minutes. So you need to have a light that is very powerful because you can use it, like we were talking about earlier, as a control device. Very much like pepper spray, if you will. And I don't want to use pepper spray as an example because it's not really the same thing. But if you find yourself in an altercation where things are starting to go south and you might piss them off, but if you hit somebody with a whole lot of lumens, it completely changes their ability to absorb information. And I've used it a couple of times and it completely changes people's attitudes. Because if you can't see and all you can see right now is white light, you may be pissed off, but you're not really willing to go get into a fight at that point. Batteries, this is a big consideration, and I'm going to talk about a couple of lights here in a minute. For the most part, you've got two great choices. Either CR123 seem to be the most powerful as far as stuff you can buy off the shelf, or there's various types of rechargeable battery, lithium rechargeable batteries out there. I'm starting to really like lithium rechargeable batteries because they tend to allow me to actually get even more brightness out of a smaller light because they end up being more powerful. And then all I got to do is just plug it in every once in a while and recharge it, and I'm back in business, and I'm not worrying about keeping a stockpile of 123s around. So batteries are important. Activation. There are a lot of different lights out here, but personally I am a believer in a tail cap switch. And the reason for that, if it's anywhere other than the tail cap, you find yourself rolling that thing around in your hand until you can find that button and then turn that button on. Whereas if it's a tail cap switch, it's always there at the end of the light. I pick it up, I've got the light. I don't have to worry about doing anything else. That's pretty much universal. I have seen there's some angle head flashlights out there. There's some really cool stuff that you can do different things with. But for general purpose, day-to-day use, I still haven't found anything that works better than a straight up tube light with a tail cap switch on it. Strobe, to strobe or not to strobe? That is the question, right? How many people have strobing lights? Anybody? Anybody? Strobes are cool and they are effective. If it strobes all the time, that is going to become a deterrent from you using the light for just normal kind of stuff, because strobes kind of work both ways. I used to be a big fan of strobes, and then until you go start trying to search around something or shoot with the strobe on and you realize it starts to affect you. And I have found that I can do the same kind of thing just by pushing the button on the back of the light. So I kind of got away from them, especially the ones that I have to push it and then push it again, it goes into strobe mode, and then I push it the third time and it goes into a low light mode, and then I got to start the cycle all over again. Initially I thought, hey, this is great, and then once things start getting complicated, you start shooting a gun with the light, doing reloads and all that other kind of stuff, all of a sudden, maybe I'm just not smart enough, but it becomes extremely difficult. And most of the guys that I talk to that work with it quite a bit, initially, like a lot of us, they liked the idea of a strobe and then completely got away from it and just went back to a simple light that turns on to the same brightness all the time. But it's a personal choice. They are great and they are effective at a disorienting tool or a control tool like we were talking about before. Real quick, before we start talking about transitional light, I want to talk about a couple of small things. A lot of people don't carry a light because they don't want to carry something that's too big. But when you look at these little like pen lights, like this little stream light, I mean, there's no excuse not to be carrying a flashlight with you. All right, this works. It still allows you to identify, is it going to be a super bright 1,000 lumen control tool like some of the other lights? Absolutely not. But it's better than not having the ability to see anything. Okay, and it makes a tremendous backup light when you just want to stick it in your pocket or carry it or in your purse or whatever it is, or leave it in your vehicle. So if your primary light dies, you still got another light that you can use. Okay, so there's just almost no excuse not to have one. This is rechargeable. It's like on bright, it's like 160 lumens or something like that, which is, you know, remember when I started doing this, we had the 65 lumen 6P and it was the Death Star like brightness and everybody thought it was amazing. And now, you know, something like this has more lumens than that 6P from years and years ago. The other light is, what is this thing? A Pro-Tac 1L1 AAA. This one is cool. And the reason it's cool is it's pretty bright, 350 lumens. It's got the 10-tap programming, so you can make it strobe if you like that. The nice thing about this one is it takes a CR123, or you can put a AA battery in it. So if you're traveling with this, or this is your backup light and you don't have a 123, I mean, you can find AA's anywhere in the world. That's not a big deal. So this gives you the ability to have a pretty darn bright light that's pretty small, easy to hold in your hand, easy to clip into your pocket. There's just no excuse to be like, oh, I don't have the space to carry, you know. I got a Glock 34 with a light and an RMR, but I don't have space for a light. That's too much. It's like, come on, you can do it. You've got the space, trust me.